Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 6 of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. I am your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm really excited to be bringing you this new season of shows coming to you on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. I have a great lineup of fascinating conversations with incredible musicians, songwriters, guitarists, steel guitarists, drummers, composers, who knows what else. I've been having an incredible time diving deep with these folks, and I know you're going to enjoy listening. Just a reminder that this year I've taken out the short song samples through the show, as things have gotten way more complicated as far as legal use of music goes, so I'll be making an accompanying Spotify playlist to each episode, which you'll find in the episode's show notes and at the website at makersandshakerspodcast.com. So anytime you hear this cute little slide guitar sound, you'll know there's a track to go along with it on the playlist. We have some new sponsors this year, but continue to be largely listener supported. Your help in keeping the show going is always appreciated, and you can do it with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription. Patreon is a monthly payment of your choice, and when you sign up for that, you get a bit of added content as well as an ad-free version of the show to listen to. If you don't feel like kicking in any dough, that's cool too, but you can help by subscribing for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just spread the word by sharing the show, following us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and telling all your pals about it. You can get links to all this stuff, of course, at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, many thanks to our sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know that I sent you. They are Isotope, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, and Spectra 1964. Hey there, folks and music nerds. Welcome back to Season 6 of the show. This is episode number 133. One of my absolute favorite bluegrass guitar players is on the show this week, Mr. Bryan Sutton. I've been trying to get Bryan on the show for a bit, so I'm glad it finally worked out. So things are rolling along here. Mostly been plugging away in the studio. I've been mixing and doing some sessions. Have not been traveling much these days, which I guess I'm sort of thankful for, considering what a crazy scene it is out there. But that also means I have not been playing a lot of live gigs, which kind of sucks. But anyway, we did a bunch of playing a couple weeks back out in Vancouver for some of my new music, and we'll be releasing some videos of all that stuff over the next few months. So that was fun and good to be back with my crew making some noise. Before we get going here, just a reminder that the Hen House Hang that you'll hear about on this season now has some 2023 dates. I think the ads that get run on here are discussing the 2022 dates, but there's actually 2023 dates. And I know it's a little early, but we are openly booking spots if you're interested in that. The dates are going to be September 25th through 28th, 2023, which is right after Americana Fest here in Nashville, and it's going to be a blast. And hope some of you might consider coming and being a part of it. So I first heard of Bryan Sutton quite a few years ago when I was getting pretty into bluegrass. I don't know, 25 years ago or something. I never took the full bluegrass plunge, but I definitely was a fan, and I, for a while, worked really hard on my flat-picking chops and dobro playing and all that. And around that time, Skaggs made a big return to bluegrass. It was sort of before a lot of the other people did. Now there's a cavalcade of people doing bluegrass stuff, but he was kind of the first real country star that said, I'm going to do some bluegrass. And he released an album that I remember really well called Bluegrass Rules, ! Bluegrass Rules, I guess. His band at the time was called Kentucky Thunder, and it was mostly youngsters with just unbelievable chops and feel. The guitar player in that band at the time was Bryan Sutton, and I'd never heard of him before then. But it turns out he'd been playing with Ricky for a while at that point, and he'd already had a fairly solid session career, but had jumped into this band and toured with them a bunch, which definitely put him on the radar of bluegrass and roots music fans, myself included. Anyway, Bryan continued to crop up on credits for albums that I'd see, and I did get a chance to see him at various festivals over the years, and he always totally blew me away with his tone and feel and the way that he was taking flat picking in some really exciting new directions. And since I moved to Nashville about 10 years ago, I hear Bryan's name a lot. Usually when there's talk of sessions, he's clearly become the top acoustic player in Nashville and gets most of the calls to fill that role in this town on all the big records that are made here. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing that's pretty unique to Nashville, this idea of being an acoustic player only. And there's a pretty serious history to it. And it's not that Bryan doesn't or can't play any electric guitar. He's just the guy when it comes to acoustic guitar, and that's what he gets called for. Someone else generally gets called to play the electric guitar. It's partly so that all of the guitar, electric and acoustic, can go down at once in the session, but also just that he's so nuanced and at such a high level on the acoustic, it makes sense to have him focused on just that. In other cities or music scenes, and when I play on sessions for the less pop stuff, like the Americana stuff that I do, it's not so much like that. I may play electric and acoustic and steel and whatever else. Anyway, it's really interesting to hear how he approaches sessions and how his path led to being where he is now, the top call guy in Nashville, as well as being out on the road lately with Bela Fleck for Bela's My Bluegrass Heart project. Bryan's credits also include records for Carrie Underwood, Eric Church, Lyle Lovett, Dierks Bentley, Tim McGraw, Blake Shelton. You get the picture. But at the heart of it, he's just a monster flatpicker who's been the International Bluegrass Music Association Guitarist of the Year 9 times. He teaches through an online course as well, and he put out a really cool solo album that I really recommend called The More I Learn. That was a few years back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and that's the last time he made a solo record. You can get info on all this stuff and check out his tour dates at bryansutton.com. And lastly, before we get going here, I'd just like to shout out to a few folks who made donations or signed up to the Patreon over the last couple weeks, Clay Connor and James Tuttle. Many thanks, you guys. I could not do it without you. And just a reminder that for all Patreon subscribers, we are going to be giving away a Union Tube and Transistor C-Verb reverb pedal at the end of this season. You just have to be a Patreon subscriber between now and the end of the season, and you'll be entered automatically. All right, so let's get down to it. Enjoy my conversation with Bryan Sutton. Since we're blabbing about studios and whatnot, I know that that's kind of an interesting thing about your career that I've noticed, I guess, is that you have really focused on the session playing side of things. And like as a fan of your playing, I feel like you probably could have made way more records by now under your own name. But
sure.
Whether that's a conscious decision or whether it's just like a matter of not having the time because you're too busy doing other stuff. I'm just wondering if the session thing has always been like something that you really wanted to pursue. I feel like it has probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, to get a little bit of like historical context, I grew up playing music all the time, just always had a guitar in my hand, and I knew that some kind of career in music was, where I was headed. But I was never really like, oh, I've got to be in a band and I want to travel the world and play shows and things like that. I mean, I would be inspired by folks like Jerry Douglas and Mark O'Connor and Sam Bush and these people, but I was also equally intrigued by seeing them play on all these records that were their own records and certainly other people's records, not even within the bluegrass world, but like people like Skaggs. And that was in this era too, where there was a lot of, like even a Randy Travis record, from the 80s that had Jerry Douglas on it or Sam Bush or something like that. Like,
were you aware, were you like following them to that extent where you were like, okay, I'm getting that Randy Travis record because Jerry's on it?
Plus I just knew Jerry's playing and I could hear him on these things. And with Ricky Skaggs too, is kind of crossover. Kind of sound. And so anyway, it just sort of helped me be aware that those kind of people were active and employed and, and making music. And I've always also kind of been a guy that really loved playing a lot of different styles. I mean, when I was a teenager, it was, a lot of electric stuff and, of course, a ton of bluegrass with the family and was studying jazz and classical throughout the week.
Classical too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Classical guitar. And just kind of really into everything and coupling that with just MTV and more of an era where there was live music in prime time and, seeing, like Live Aids or stuff on the Nashville network and just bands playing live and seeing people doing, the kind of music that I wanted to play. Anyway, all that led to just me looking around our little town there of Asheville. And I knew some of the studio folk from recordings that my family band had made. So I knew it existed, but I immediately just kind of fell in love with this environment, where people show up and make music, and it's, so every day, pretty much after my senior year in high school, I would go hang out at this particular studio in Asheville and just got to know people. Just I was a fly on the wall. I'm like, yeah, this is me. I knew that that was a route that I wanted to take. And
what studio was that? Is that something that's still there?
Yeah, a version of it is still there. They've moved the actual facility. Right now it's called Crossroads, but back in the day it was called Here.
Okay.
Hearhere, Here. And it was primarily gospel.
Catchy.
Yes, it's very catchy. It was primarily kind of a home base for a lot of gospel music that was based out of there. And I didn't really grow up around that. And
What was your connection to that studio? Like how?
Well, it's weird. My next door neighbor was a piano player named Anthony Berger, who anybody that's listening that's has been into Southern gospel music for 30, 40 years will know he was like one of the most popular piano players in that scene. And
As an artist or as a session?
He made his own records. He was a sideman or a piano player for a real famous quartet called the Kingsmen.
Okay.
But he was my next door neighbor. Literally, walk out my back door and there's his driveway. And so he was the guy that I went to and just said, what do you think I ought to do? And he just come hang out. And so I did, and just continued to like.
And did you love it?
Yeah,
you loved
totally.
Just that experience of being in there, seeing the action.
Yeah, and I was the kind of nerdy kid too in high school that had basically a double cassette deck, and I would try to layer things that way. I didn't have any kind of multi-track, but just I kind of knew that was possible, and still to this day, I'm just sort of fascinated with the fact that music gets recorded the way it does, and there's multi-tracks, and you can fix and edit, and I mean, it's just there's such a process about it that I'm a fan of and enjoy being part of from day one and to right now. It's
surprising to me that you never got into the recording / engineering side or producing side more than you have. I know you have a bit, but
yeah. I mean, I've done a little bit of the producing thing, and I'm Pro Tools. We're all Pro Tools aware enough these days. You kind of have to be. But just, as a player, I feel like that's where I hang my hat.
Yeah.
And too, with the scheduling, sometimes you will know too, like when you agree to produce something, it's a real commitment of time more than it is anything. Yep. The creative part, I love it. It's just hard to carve out a couple of months or more for a record. Right. I've done it, and I'll probably continue to do it here and there. But it's just within the balance of it all. I think I enjoy, again, like playing a lot of different kinds of music with a lot of different kinds of people, and just knowing that, on any given week I could be doing all kinds of things, and then again just go out on the road with Bela Fleck. And so the balance of it all really is the key, where it's not all one thing or the other.
I was talking about that just the other day with somebody that was here on another episode, and that whole balancing act in careers just seems to be like the never-ending goal of many people, myself included.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's part of my temperament makeup is I get not burnt out, but kind of, I don't even say bored, but just I enjoy doing a lot of different things. Right. I'm kind of fueled and fired by that, knowing that I can go do be involved in a lot of different types of things and a lot of different types of conversations and collaborate. That's always, again, the heart of being a session player is you're really there, at least in this town. It's not about going in and just rendering a score. It's like you're there to collaborate and make a part and try to find something that feels valuable to the end goal and helps the thing along. And I really do love all that too.
There's not a lot of information out there on your studio activities. There's credits and stuff like that. But if we could talk about that for a second, because my understanding, and I don't know this for sure, but from what it seems like, is you're the top call acoustic guitar player in this town currently. Like you play on a shit ton of records.
Yeah, there's a lot.
How many sessions a week are you doing? Is it totally up and down? Is it?
It's very up and down, especially these days. I think, because I do kind of keep a foot out in the touring world, and I do put a lot of energy into that. I've historically not done as much as I could if I'd have just whole hog said I am nothing but a session player. There have been seasons or periods of life where I did primarily that, but in those heydays, you could be 5 days a week, for several weeks in a row before any kind of break. But I think generally the current ebb and flow is anywhere between, on average, 2 to 3 days a week.
Are you always on acoustic guitar? Is that what you're called for every time, or do you play electric and other stuff too? These days, 97% of the time.
Every
time I see you mentioned, it's always acoustic guitar, and I get it, obviously, but it seems like that's become the thing that you're known for.
Well, I made a decision, in that early day of me hanging out in Asheville, there was a fellow there named David Johnson that, continues to be a big inspiration for me, as a multi-instrumentalist. And he played everything very, very well. And that was part of my challenge too back in the day was to basically be available when he couldn't. So I had to learn all these instruments and get a little more aware, kind of turn my jazz and rock and roll chops on electric to more like, okay, who's this guy, Brent Mason or some of these country players that were on records at the time. And when I moved to Nashville, that's kind of what I was doing, playing fiddle and electric guitar. And
oh, you played fiddle too?
Well, again, I was serviceable as a fiddler. But the point is that I was doing all that and kind of realized several years into the game of it that like, okay, this, because I can do everything is really not a good thing for career-wise.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's not what you would think.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, I can offer all this stuff, but what really happens in a town like Nashville, at least, which is, if they've got the budget to go get the dude that does the thing, they're going to go do that. Right. They're not going to spend, a certain amount of money on somebody that does 6 different things. If so, what that means is the kind of records that I found myself working on a lot were fairly kind of low budget records, i.e. not great music. I felt a lot of times I would leave there feeling like, okay, this is probably a good work experience, but this is less than musical, and it feels very like, all right, I don't get a break. We cut a track and the drummer and the bass player go off, and I'm sitting there for another hour and a half but doing stuff, and they're like, okay, let's do the next song now. And I'm like, wait, I've got to go to the bathroom. So there was a lot of this like spinning wheels, like this is not really going anywhere.
This is like early Nashville days for you you're talking about?
Yeah, mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, and it finally hit me like if I really want to play on these records that I'm aiming for, I need to do one thing really well.
Which was top level like country stuff
you'll top 40 Nashville stuff, commercial.
So you really had like set your sights on doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, back to the early days of like seeing Jerry Douglas's name on all these records. And there were some acoustic players out of the bluegrass world that I would notice on the tracks. Sometimes you might see Pat Flynn or Russ Behrenberg. But primarily it was people like Don Potter and Mark Castevens and Bobby All. And so I kind of felt like, there may be a little niche for me as far as like more of a bluegrass-based kind of player to just be more active, not just occasionally showing up on records when a track called for it, or Jerry Douglas knew somebody that knew somebody else. It's like I wanted to be in the scene, be in the community of musicians on a regular call.
Because a lot of guys that are known as bluegrass players, which essentially you are/were at that point, get pegged as like bluegrass guys, and they don't necessarily do what you're talking about, which is get into the pop/country, like the big budget stuff.
Well, I mean, my challenges again for myself from early days was to really study what was on the radio and work to recreate it and be able to at least be inspired by it and not feel like everything I do has to have a D28 and a heavy pick. And I would also couple that with a really early session experience down in South Carolina where I was asked to leave because I didn't have a thin enough pick, couldn't quite do that country strum thing.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was a lesson. You kind of learn from your negative experiences. And that was the lesson. Like, if I really want to do this, I've got to be able to offer this sort of palette of sounds and characters. I mean, I've really seen session players as kind of character actors. Like, okay, you need some kind of drugged out dead string guy on a street corner, strumming with his thumb versus, some intricate, kind of thing here, whatever, and I enjoy kind of going down all those paths. And again, to the point of like the collaboration and feeling like I can offer that's important to the track or the project or whatever.
Do you feel like sometimes those sessions you end up playing like way below your pay grade, like as far as what you're able to contribute doesn't really get used?
Well, I think what I would say about that is like Nashville session players, as a rule, are all extremely capable to run this whole gambit of what's possible musically. And most of us do really kind of enjoy and get off on the idea that we can, engage in different levels of what's necessary to make a certain song happen. So it's this real song service kind of thing. And it's because that's the end goal. It doesn't matter that, I can do lots of other more complex things on the instrument, but that doesn't matter right now. And if I do get into the headspace of like, oh, this is beneath me, and again, that's like rule number one of session players, leave that ego at the door. Yeah. That's, as Tom Bukovac puts it, it's a service industry, and it couldn't be more correct.
Cool. Yeah.
And again, that's what I love about it is the sweet spot of, I can bring a lot musically, and I've got a lot of good guitars, and I know how to mic them, and I know what to go for. And that's, even though I can do more complex things, all that kind of lumped into like, here's what the session job is. And it can be just as complex to kind of figure out that puzzle. Again, back to kind of the character actor, like how believable can I make this sound for this singer or this song? And it's within all that, I think it doesn't come down to like, oh, I could be doing this, but I have to do this. It's I see equal footing for, if it's a Burnin' Bela Fleck complex,
that's
piece
sort of a
of
whole
music,
different beast, right?
Yeah, versus like just a one chord little simplistic Nashville thing. I mean, again, I love them equally.
That's cool.
And I love being part of each.
When you get a call, like if I am doing a session, it's usually for something that me and the person that's calling me know exactly what I'm going to do. It's like a slide guitar thing or a pedal steel thing. It's like I know what they want, sort of. With you, when you are getting a call from somebody that maybe you haven't worked with before and you're being asked to play acoustic guitar, like that's a pretty broad,
right.
defined
Totally.
thing. Do you have a conversation at that point? Like, what exactly do you want? How do you decide what to bring? Or do you just bring everything and just sort of like jump in and go for it?
Yeah, it can go different directions. If the producer or whoever's calling has a specific idea, or maybe I played on something 10 years ago, that's, as I've been doing this now for a long time, people will say, we like what you did on this Dierks Bentley or this Eric Church or whatever record, and we want that kind of, whatever that sound is, and I'll know, what that is. And so sometimes, there's like specific ideas of what kind of guitars need to be there or guitar. But generally, like especially on the general Nashville call, that could go 1,000 different directions over a couple of days. It'll be here's the trunks that get rolled in with all the guitars and the, the 12 strings and nylon strings and mandolins and
How big is the trunk? I don't mean physically. How many guitars are in the trunk?
I think what generally shows up on a session, I've got two. One's kind of about the size of a refrigerator and another one's a little bit smaller. And the smaller one is 6, and in the big one, it houses a lot of like utility stuff, the mandolins and the banjos. Probably all together, there's about 15 instruments.
Okay.
And then I may carry in 2 or 3 things.
Your holy grails, guitar-wise, don't sit in those.
Not generally.
Cases, though.
No, I've got some good stuff in there, but like my main, like Martins stay at home with me.
Do they come to sessions generally, or they do?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Because that's, again, like guitar choices that I've made over the years too, as a guy that kind of keeps a foot in both worlds. I don't look at a Martin D28 from the 30s as just a bluegrass guitar. It's actually really powerful, like in a country track, under the right kind of singer as a real muscular kind of ballad or something like that,
Palette-wise, if you're playing acoustic guitar on a session, how much can you vary, or how much do you think it can vary between, like mic position, the choice of pick, those kind of small details that, I mean, for you, that's going from a light to a heavy pick, that's a huge difference. Well, to the average listener, it may not make a huge amount of difference, but for you, the whole instrument would feel different. Yeah,
that's also part of the nerd out that I really enjoy of like, it's pairing wine with the right dish or like, if I'm a stage director or designer in a play, like what lighting does this scene need right now? What helps the overall vibe be more of that vibe? And so, it comes down to, on a music stand in any given session, there's 30 to 40 picks of varying.
Okay. So you have like a thing that comes out and it's got
like
all
EQ, like a thinner pick with a certain kind of amber plastic material, has that front of the note little thwip that's, a nylon pick doesn't have, or nylon-based pick doesn't have. And I get into all that, and different guitars with different setups, different string gauges, different string ages. Like I've got this Gibson Southern Jumbo that's set of strings have been on that maybe 12 years to 15
really?
Now. Yeah. And
you obviously don't have really sweaty hands like I do.
Not in the studio. I kill them on a bluegrass set, but that's like that Gibson is great, just for the right kind of song. And again, the other version of that for me is maybe like a newer Bourgeois that's got new strings on it that's bright and crispy sounding. And I think a listener would notice the difference. And you also think too, like, if it is a piece of art where there's many things coming together to kind of create a singular thing, that at least what I'm doing is to help that singular thing feel like a more believable, stronger entity. If that means a real thin pick and kind of a Tom Petty sort of strum pattern or something like that on a 12 string, that's helping. Again, it's palettes, it's colors, lighting. I see it all as that, and just have developed various strategies and specific kind of pathways to sound. In the same way, like you would have a pedal board, that's got this kind of delay versus this kind of delay or this kind of overdrive, why you would choose a Rat over a tube driver or something like that.
Yeah.
I get into those paths.
With picks.
Picks and strings and capos.
I love that. That's so cool, though. Like it really is a huge game changer. So do you discuss those options with the producer generally, or do you just kind of keep it to yourself and just be like, I'm going to take this and
sometimes I will. There'll be, it's nuanced stuff. You mentioned mic placement, and sometimes, with an engineer, it's just like 2 inches to the right, please. And that'll make a difference in how clear the low end becomes because I've gotten 2 inches away from the hole maybe of the acoustic guitar. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes with the producer, I'll do you like the way kind of the forward leaning brightness of this guitar sits in the track versus maybe the more mellower, rounded pick? Yeah. That's more of a glossy kind of less noticeable kind of thing. And, some certain producers are geared into that. A lot of guys, again, are just going to trust me to make a good decision.
Yep. What about layers? If you start in on a song that's, say, like a Tom Petty kind of thing, and you're laying down a straight 6 string and you're thinking like, a nice 12 would be good, mm-hmm. like over on the other side, do you voice that opinion, or do you leave it up to the producer, or do you say like, hey, I'm going to do this, but then I'm going to do this?
Yeah, it varies, depending on the producer. Sometimes I've worked enough with a lot of these folks to say, okay, let's do the thing where we, do the true double and pan them hard, or we want to capo another inversion up and then put, layered 12-string strums, whole notes in the choruses. There's okay, here's our marching orders. And sometimes it develops as the track develops, because that's within the Nashville way that's pretty improvisational. You show up with a general idea about what the song could be, but not 100% sure how it's going to get there. And so there are moments, within the tracking process where, this would actually, because of where the bridge is going now, or we made a key change happen. And so therefore I'm going to bring another guitar in to kind of lift everything. But I love that part of it too. If I'm nerding out on picks and strings and guitars, I'm also seeing the guitar part like an orchestra. Mm-hmm. And I really do enjoy creating sections where, where multiple instruments are kind of working with each other. And sometimes that'll also involve other musicians on the session to play parts with me. So, sometimes it's really cool, for certain hook licks that may be driven by a mandolin or acoustic guitar, to have the piano just come in on the last 3 notes. Right. And so, that's also fun too, as far as the whole layering thing. And I do a lot where I'll sort of leave space for some kind of maybe hook kind of part, you might think of more like an octave piano just playing some kind of real spaced out line over the chorus. I'll create layers of a mandolin and a resonator that kind of creates this sort of dulcimer-y tone. And it's, especially when you put some of the effect kind of stuff on it, it can be a really cool sound, and I really do like that.
I love that whole thing of combining 2 instruments to that's sort of like a Beatles thing. It goes back to those days for mm-hmm. sure, of slowed down piano plus a 12-string guitar equals a mystery instrument. Yeah.
Well, and I, back in the early days of working with Ricky Skaggs on those records, he learned a lot from Brian Ahern back in the Emmylou Harris days. Great producer, just as far as stacking guitars. And then we have folks like Jeff Lynne, with all those great records. And just there's such a...
Have you ever worked with him?
No. Okay. Love to.
Yeah.
Great template out there.
You get a lot of work on a record of his. You're doing 36 tracks a song, man.
Yeah. There have been certain producers over the years where we'll kind of go that direction. It's never been dozens of guitars, but we'll, maybe
get up there.
Yeah, 8 or 10 doing different things.
That whole idea is very the opposite of bluegrass, which, mm-hmm. The whole idea of stacking and layering instruments, it just doesn't exist in the bluegrass world. Influence-wise for you, did you hear, were you turned on to Zeppelin record, things that had orchestrated guitar parts?
Totally.
Those are influences for you?
Yeah, Led Zeppelin a little later in the career, But I'd have to say too, like even a Tony Rice record where Wyatt is there too, doing some other part, like the
Church Street.
Just beautifully arranged, thoughtful guitar arrangements. One of my favorite Tony Rice projects is actually a compilation of all his Gordon Lightfoot covers, and these tunes like Shadows, Early Morning Rain, that where he and Wyatt are thinking about what each other are playing, and they're complementary, and even back to the Doc and Merle sound, which is this, it's, I think, probably a little less thought about, but you can tell there's listening and again, sort of one thing that's happening as a result of two things.
Yeah.
And those were things that I recognized early on too, not just in, big production kind of records, but in my sort of wheelhouse of the guitar records that were really informing me as a kid. But, again, like the Tom Petty stuff and even within the Nashville world, like to listen to a Don Williams record or a Judd's record, Don Potter on those Judd's records is just brilliant.
Is he's the acoustic player? Oh, okay. Yeah, there's guys like some of those legendary guys that like just strummed rhythm acoustic guitar their entire career, and they were so damn good at it, and
it's
underappreciated, right?
Yeah,
it's like hard.
Yeah, well, it's feel, it's harmonic kind of sensitivity, team player kind of sensitivity as well. Especially like working with drummers has been kind of an exercise in really trying to agree with the rhythmic, with whatever the feel is, basically, which you kind of do in bluegrass too, but it's just generally kind of a different sort of scene. For me, so I didn't grow up playing with a lot of drummers, so that's been part of my continuing lesson is just because a lot of people will, put the hi-hat in different places or where the backbeat gets felt, from somebody that's, played drums their whole life is not where the bluegrass backbeat goes.
Which is really forward, right?
Yeah. And so that's a great lesson. And so the parts aren't that complex, like you say, just a simple strum, but the way it lays in the track and the way it sort of keeps things moving at the right kind of travel, musical travel.
Who are the guys? Like who was the A team of acoustic strumming guitar players that like that's all they did? Yeah,
the guy that most Nashville people need to be aware of is Ray Edenton.
Crazy, like I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah, Ray Edenton played on a good chunk of the stuff, and there's a lot of other guys too, like Fred Carter, of course, Jimmy Capps.
I know those guys.
And I'm dropping names now. Oh shoot!
So what era are we talking? Are we talking 60s?
We're talking 60s through 70s, 80s, probably some 50s too.
Okay.
There was a lot more artists that played on their records in the 50s. People like George Jones would probably just strum.
Yep.
He would be his own guitar player. But as far as session guys, it just did that. Ray Edenton, again, is one of the top crew. I wish I could, that's the guy, I can't think of his name now, that like played the Jolene part. And then, a lot of those guys look to Chet Atkins too, because if you're not doing the strum, then it was probably some kind of thumb picking, kind of alternating, kind of Merle Travis influenced part.
Yeah.
That was sort of one or two things.
Right. How much of that kind of stuff do you do?
Minimal. I mean, I can be believable with it.
I bet.
But it's, when I listen to guys like Richard Smith and Tommy Emmanuel, I'm not a finger stylist.
Right. Do you put a thumb pick on, or do you just kind of fake it with a hybrid picking kind of thing?
I will fake it with hybrid picking or just use a thumb, in the studio. Where it translates for me is in more of sort of like a sensitive guitar part that, I can show you. If this is like the dock, or the chat, the thumb thing, where what works for me in like Nashville, especially a lot of modern stuff or Americana, where that, of course, I would be in tune, but that kind of thing, just a sort of a singer-songwriter kind of rolly part, I've worked on a lot of that kind of stuff, or just found myself playing it a lot, and I really like it. So finger style is not so much, again, like the high bar of like a Tommy Emmanuel or, some of these just crazy wizards of the instrument.
Yeah.
It's usually a little more kind of what would the singer, what feels realistic for this singer to be playing. In most of the records that I play on, to be something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you get called on to do finger style stuff that much, or is it generally not that?
It's pretty common that something like that will show up on a good number of the records that I play on, to some degree. If it's not like that sort of mellow finger thing, it would be that version with the pick that has a little more kind of brightness about it. Yeah. And it's also a little more maybe part of a bigger sound too, or like that little thing I was playing earlier would kind of define the whole part. When I use the pick and the fingers, it's louder, but I can also transition between more of an arpeggio to more of a strum kind of pattern, because the pick's in my hand. I wouldn't do that with the other approach. So that's, I mean, again, like 3 different potential sounds that are, again, depending on the song. Like, especially like in Nashville, you might have an intro and a first verse that are, more to that sensitivity level with the arpeggio, and then I got to go to a strum by the time it goes to the chorus. And so being able to kind of navigate that instead of having to stop and punch in a new thing. Again, that's sort of the efficiency part of the session.
What about mic selection? Because that to me makes a massive difference too. Like probably to me almost as much as, old strings versus new strings or pick versus fingers. Mic selection's a huge thing. Do you get involved in that in a session? Or
Sometimes.
Do you just kind of go with what's there?
Again, there are certain producers that have, this is exactly what we want. Joey Moy that produces Morgan Wallen and a lot of kind of newer stuff that's out there, really likes this, big fat Neumann M49. And my favorite mic is favorites, KM56 or a KM86. Mm-hmm. I really like those. And so there are certain engineers that I'll work with that they know that, and they'll stick up a KM86. But again, it depends on the record. Sometimes, it's really good to have something like that, like a hi-fi kind of Neumann thing, but also have a SM57 beside it or a ribbon. And depending on kind of the spatial kind of awareness, there's the classic sort of Bill Vorndick style where there's a mic up by your right ear to kind of capture this kind of stereo imagery. Or, Gary Pachoza will put 2 mics that kind of one above and one below that kind of come in and around the 14th or 16th fret.
Oh, yeah?
To kind of capture the guitar that way.
Interesting. And into a stereo thing or into a mono thing?
Stereo. And then there's other kind of strategies of stereo miking or distance miking. Usually on most of the records where, again, I'm going to be a sound in amongst a bunch of drums, and it helps the mix to just have a little more of a clean, clear tone. There's a disadvantage in being too far away from the guitar, too much room. So generally, I'm pretty close up there around the fretboard extension and with some kind of mic.
In the process of a modern country pop record, like a big budget, however many of those are left, I don't know.
Yeah.
But in those kind of things that you're doing these days or in the last 5-10 years or whatever, how much time are you spending on the record? And at some point, are you, like the drummer, just done before everybody else is? Or are you sticking around and adding things and coming up with other parts? Or are you just sort of like rhythm section done?
Yeah. Thankfully, Nashville's still one of these towns where within about 3 hours, we've got a fairly finished product. If it's that kind of budget to spend that kind of time on one track, which some people would say that's, you need days. But again, when you get the right people with the right song, I feel like across the board, we kind of know what the marching orders are, and we can get to that point. And again, I think it serves the purpose of what is on the radio, for better or for worse, coming out of Nashville. Meaning there's some formula there. There's some, okay, this worked on the last record, so we're going to do this again. Yep. There's it's the business of it. Kind of defines a lot of that stuff too, versus like, hey, we're just going to explore for 8 hours.
Right.
Those are fun records too, like a T-Bone record where it's like, we're just going to take whatever time it takes. But anyway, the point is, I will be part of the main track. And again, what's good about Nashville is the fact that we're all on the floor, electric players, drummers, bass players, keyboardists, usually a live vocal. It may just be a scratch vocal, but the singer's there to help, have input about tempo.
Is that pretty much across the board? Is the artist always there on those bigger records?
The majority of the time. I'll give it a solid 95% of the time.
Okay.
If not, it's usually some kind of scheduling conflict where they just couldn't be there. But a lot of times, again, in the modern era, they've written the song or they've got some kind of personal attachment to what needs to happen in there. And
they want to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so...
that's heartening.
Yeah, it is. It's a good thing. We can, within a few hours kind of lay all the necessary parts. And the drummer may be sitting around more than I am, but, depending on what it is, sometimes there may be, layers and layers of percussion stuff that need to go on or some programming or, sometimes they'll say, bring a little small kit that we'll throw in the corner and mic it with, just a little stereo thing and run it through a filter and create a loop. They're doing some of that kind of stuff too. Those are things that generally are if it's something like that, they're going to know pretty quickly.
So 2 songs a day, 3 songs a day kind of vibe?
Yeah, most of the things that I'm working on these days, there's, thankfully a good budget to spend 3 hours on a tune. So it's a kind of a civilized 2-session day where you're done at 5. Yeah. That's going to be 2 songs, sometimes more. We got in a thing last week with a project where, it was just not that the songs were particularly easy. It's just there was a good day of like, here's the vibe, here's things happening quickly, and there wasn't a lot of thought, And again, I think with country music too, it's good to allow for that. Just because something happens quickly doesn't mean that something's wrong.
Right.
It's okay. Maybe something's extremely right.
Yeah.
And it's just efficient, and hey, we did it. It's okay. Sometimes it works out that way. Sometimes you hit a home run on the first swing.
What are your favorite studios to work at? In town, here.
I'm a fan of the rooms at Blackbird.
You do a lot of records there, yeah.
A lot in Blackbird D these days.
Which one is D?
That's the one with the big API board.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's sort of the big tracking room and a couple of booths on either side.
Yeah. Do you work at Sound Emporium much?
I love the vibe at Sound Emporium, always have. I've made a few of my own records there. And
did you ever work at Southern Ground?
Mm-hmm.
I liked that place.
Yep.
That was my favorite.
Yep, I loved that. I enjoy Ocean Way. What's hard?
It's so big.
It's so big. What's hard is that a lot of times I get put in this booth at Ocean Way, and I'm trying not to run anybody under the bus here, and I've had conversations with the studio manager that this is...
Are you like 40 feet away from the action?
Well, all I can see is just whoever's sitting on the couch, but the main thing is that the AC, like in the wintertime, it's freezing in there. In the summertime, it's burning up. Like I had to put a fan in there a couple of days ago just to kind of cool it down when I wasn't working. And I've got to either wear a long sleeve or put a towel on top of the guitar because my skin starts sticking because I start sweating while I'm playing. And it's just, it's not optimized work conditions like that when you're recording acoustic guitar and you hear, with your skin coming off the top because you're changing positions or something like that. So it's as much as I love that room and the piano sounds great and certainly the drums are wonderful in that room. I've worked a lot in there. It's one of my favorite places, but it does come with some...
I don't really understand why people would choose it though for like a country record. I mean, if you're doing some orchestral stuff or some horns or something maybe, but like drums, bass, a couple utility people, that's a big room.
Yeah, the piano's really good. A lot of the like people like Gordon Mote that are really dialed into what pianos are doing what in town. That's one of their favorites.
What is it, a Steinway or something?
No, I don't know. Maybe it's a Yamaha C7. It's just a particularly good one. And I do think drums, for a lot of the kind of bombastic things that can happen on sort of, more pop or rock leaning country records, you're going to get that in that big cavernous room at Ocean Way that you don't get at Sound Emporium. So, a lot of that goes into the choice. Blackbird D is a real serious sweet spot for everything.
That's a good size room. I like that place.
Yeah, it always sounds great. The headphones feel great in there.
That's a big thing. People don't realize that. That's a thing.
Oh, totally. It's they've got the whole, and most of the big studios like that have you've got your own 16-channel mixer beside you.
Yeah.
Which sometimes it's fun to just not have that too. We're all listening to the same mix, and there's something to be said for that as well.
You mentioned T-Bone Burnett. What records have you done with him?
We did a bunch of tracking at Sound Emporium. When was that? 8 or 10 years ago for a project that actually never came out. There was some energies for a minute to try to make this Bill Monroe biopic, and we cut a ton of music to support that. And some of it may get used in some degree. I don't know.
Who was the artist?
It was a combination. It was a real sort of smorgasbord of bluegrass people coming in and doing a bunch of Bill Monroe music. It would be a great record just on its own.
No doubt.
And then I worked on a Diana Krall record with him.
Oh yeah,
up in New York. A couple other things. There's a few.
You weren't involved in the George and Tammy thing he was just doing here? Okay.
No, I got a call for one of those things, but I couldn't do it. That's the tricky part of people like that. You get a call and man, I'd love to I need to be doing that, but there's something else going on. I just back to the balance of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good problem to have. The Diana thing was fun. I like getting out of Nashville too. When I've done things in L.A. or Austin or New York.
How often does that happen?
Rarely. I would love to do a little bit of that more. Just to kind of
everybody listening.
Yeah. Just to kind of get out of the the churn of the Nashville thing. Yeah. It's fun, just being out of town. And I think, what I like about it too is, I go home every night here in Nashville. And it's not that I don't like doing that, but just when you're, away from the house and you're a little more focused on the project. Yeah.
So was that Ragdoll record of Diana's? And that's sort of a jazz thing.
Yeah.
And so what was your role in that?
One of the things I did was kind of a Django-inspired sort of intro, first verse kind of.
You spent a few days up there doing that?
It was mainly kind of one big day on that one. I think there were some other players.
That's cool that he brought you in, though.
Mark Rebo, yeah.
There's some pretty good players in New York.
Yeah.
It's nice to be in the crew there.
Yeah, and again, like with a guy like T-Bone that I feel as a producer and a musician is really dialed into, to the vibe and who's doing what. And he definitely gets specific people for specific things. And,
totally.
To hang out and play with a guy like Jay Bellarose, too. He doesn't usually play on most of the sessions I'm on in Nashville. So, I enjoy all these different kind of characters and kind of
lots of stuff with Jay. He's a...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really inspirational.
Bluegrass-wise, do you ever feel when you're doing all this other stuff detached from that zone at all? Like it's kind of a separate part of the brain in a way.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, do
you have to get back in the shed a little bit and
Totally.
You do bone up on the chops a little bit before you go out with Bela Fleck and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, back even in the early versions of this, where this is now back to the mid '90s when I first started playing with Ricky. I'd been doing primarily, again, a lot of electric playing and fiddle playing for, a few years before that, and not doing any kind of that kind of lead guitar, bluegrass, heavy workload stuff. And generally, though,
So how did Ricky, how was he aware of you if you weren't even really focused on acoustic bluegrass?
Well, it's an interesting sort of flow of time there, where his newest band member was the bass player Mark Fain, who joined the band in April of '95. And the guy that I replaced left in late June, early July of '95. So Mark was new to the band, and I'd just done some sessions with Mark over the years. Thank you. And so, as you know, the music business, it's as much about who you know than what you know. And so it was just a timing thing of this guy left, Mark was new to the band, and said, "Hey, I know this kid Bryan." And, within a week or so, I was in the band. And that was also, as far as Ricky's timeline, when he was transitioning more to guitar.
I remember when that record came out.
Yeah.
That totally blew people's minds, mine included. It was a heavy thing that was unexpected.
The Bluegrass Rules record.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I joined the band, before I became the guitar player in the bluegrass band, I was the utility guy. Again, it's where all that stuff that I've been doing to replace David Johnson paid
So you were
off.
playing some fiddle and mandolin?
I was playing twin fiddles with Bobby Hicks and playing banjo, playing the banjo part on Country Boy, which is nuts. And some strumming and some singing. And there was a telly player there that left also, Keith Sewell, great musician. And we were doing these sort of hybrid shows, half country, half bluegrass.
Oh, so he wasn't fully committed to the bluegrass.
There was a transition
yet. Okay.
He was aiming that way. And so it was like this wave that was building and crashing, and I was a surfer and just happened to catch all this at the right time. I got into it as a fiddle player, utility guy, and ended up there as a lead guitar player in a bluegrass band. And so in the midst of that, again, Keith left when we were doing some of these country shows, and I started playing the telly parts and all the country, or what was the country part of the show. And that worked out to not have, kind of a competition between two guitar players of who would be the lead guy in the acoustic stuff. So anyway, all that to say, that's how I got into the whole Skaggs thing.
Was it called Kentucky Thunder then, or was that the mark in the sand where he's going to bluegrass?
He had a country record called Kentucky Thunder some years before. And I think the band just kind of organically morphed into that kind of name. Because Skaggs bands have always kind of garnered some attention way back in the country days, when the CMA used to give awards for the band of the year, and his band was always a perennial favorite there.
Yeah, I bet.
And so it kind of transitioned to more. Now I'm out playing lead bluegrass all the time.
So how did that sit with you? Were you were into it? Obviously, it was a thing that you were keen to do.
Yeah.
That took you out of the studios and sort of diverted your career at that point, right?
Yeah, well, it's weird. I used to, have these little conversations with myself, when I was first in Nashville of I know this is what I want to do and I don't want to travel, but, if somebody like Ricky Skaggs or Vince Gill ever calls, well, I'll have to rethink this. And okay, here we are rethinking it. And that's really got me on this sort of track of like, can I do both? And also knew like there's always been a vibe. It's a whole lot less, thankfully, today, but a vibe amongst Nashville session players, the community that, where you don't travel. And if you do travel, it's almost like you're kind of
out of the game.
Yep. If you're not available, if you're not here all the time, then you're not going to get in. That's the way in, is to be here and only here. and neither the two shall meet.
Because you get that phone call only a few times where it's like, I can't do it, I'm on the road, and you're out of the Rolodex.
Yeah, so I kind of challenge, again, I sort of recognize this challenge to sort of figure out there's got to be some way to do both. And maybe I could balance it.
Like, to me, that gig put you in people's brains. Like, that's the reason that people got to start to know who you were.
There was a payoff of that, and directly too back into the session scene here, where we did a performance in Nashville. There used to be this thing called the NAMI Awards, like a Grammy kind of just the Nashville music community. And the Skaggs band played, again, this we're talking 97 or 8, and we got up there and ripped through something, and I got a call literally the next day from Paul Worley, the Dixie Chicks producer, who they were all out there watching. They're like, let's get this guy to play on some of our tunes. And so that was where, again, kind of the two had a lovely little crossing. And it was a high profile situation, but still, like, if you're, day-to-day kind of Nashville churn kind of producer or player, in the player community, they're not quite as plugged into to that. I think the fact that there wasn't an internet back then too was probably, part of it. There wasn't like YouTube videos to start going around and sharing. It was all word of mouth. But yeah, the Skaggs thing was a way for me to get back into playing bluegrass more, and it kind of connected me back to my roots in a good way and got me back into that scene, and really also to a point of just me being a player, a craftsman, the craft of that kind of guitar playing, because it was really fast, and this is in the era before pickups and in-ear monitors too. I mean, it was just all stage volume, and me having.
How do you reckon with that? Like, how do you get? Because I know, like I play guitar too, but I'm not a flat picker per se. But like, that's a hard thing to compete volume-wise with a fiddle and a mandolin and a banjo. Yeah,
I mean, I drew on some of and still do, kind of the fact that I've been doing this since I was 6 or 8 years old. And there was just some fundamental mechanics in place that...
Can you tell me a bit about those fundamental mechanics?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, a lot of the...
Because I got to say, when I met you at Tim O'Brien's place, I was sitting... We were in a circle, and I was sitting like 3 or 4 people away from you. I was playing a national, so I didn't have a volume issue. But...
Lucky.
Yeah. I just remember hearing you play, like, for the first time up close in person. I was just like, holy shit. Like, there was so much volume coming out of your acoustic guitar, way more than anybody else in that room. I'm sure partly it's like the guitar is great, but 90% of it is the way that you're able to project through the instrument, which is hard.
We could get into hours of kind of some theories about human mechanics and posture, but the fundamental thing, like a lot of athletes will get into as well. There's a way to kind of, again, I think it boils down to understanding how to use your body, listening to your body, listening to tension, and you challenge yourself with kind of recognizing the sweet spot of what you're forcing and what you're allowing. A lot of what I feel like is available to me to help me project is not about trying to play loud, but just noticing what happens when I am in a little more of a state of flexibility and openness. Now we're talking, like, golfers will talk about.
Have you gone through a period of fighting it?
That was part of the whole Skaggs experience for me, was a lot of fighting and a lot of tension, a lot of pain, and a lot of like scary situations. I remember one show of just really playing hard and the body just shut down. It's like I couldn't make my hand move anymore.
God.
And so it really opened up, like, there's got to be a better way. So I learned a lot about, again, it's the inner game it's really based kind of in Eastern thought of this, again, kind of listening to yourself, breathing, mindfulness as it applies to like a motor skill or the human body in action doing something. It does get kind of head trippy into that kind of stuff. But I really, it's sort of disciplines of thought, if you will, too. But, like the point on the guitar, when I am using, you can't see this, but when I'm using more from my elbow down to the tips of the fingers, that's akin to like if I'm throwing you a ball with more of my whole arm versus just the wrist and hand. Most players, acoustic players that I see, especially folks that are coming from the electric world, will kind of plant on the bridge and just and really drive. Most of the motion is limited to the hand and wrist. Which is not a bad sound. Should have tuned. But like, just listen to one note. That versus this. Whoa. And again, if I do just dig in a slight bit more, even in this, I mean, this is a 00018 small body guitar. It's almost like your EQ, like a high pass filter.
Yeah.
When I reduce down to wrist and hand, it's thinner than.
And that's just your feeling motion kind of in the forearm.
Yeah, I'm lifting the wrist off the bridge and using more of the full.
I've never even thought about that. That's crazy.
And so, like, if I were to throw a ball with the wrist and hand, it's going to be limited on how far I can throw that. But using more of my body, again, if you're throwing, even down to your hips and stuff like that, but just limited to what's possible in a guitar. It's using more of the maximum amount that's available to me to help produce a sound.
Was that a revelation when you figured that out, or were you aware of that the whole time?
When I first started kind of trying to examine my own fight with tension, that's when I recognized that for me. And again, when I'm now teaching this kind of stuff, I recognize that after, again, watching a lot of players kind of fight to be heard. And I know, okay, this is what you're doing. And if we can change this experience and you notice this bigger sound as a result of more of your wrist or more of your forearm working with your wrist and hand, there's an inherent efficiency there that's actually more sustainable too. When you ask smaller muscles to do more of the work, that's less sustainable, more tension. So for me, it comes down to a lot of that kind of understanding of what I'm putting into this thing to help optimize the guitar. And again, the guitar does help, like in a bluegrass situation. I mean, this is not a D28 or a dreadnought size body, but it does help every guitar in some shape or fashion.
So in those Skaggs, that like mid to late 90s Skaggs tours, you're all playing into one mic, or were you separately mic'd?
It's all separate mics, separate monitors.
Okay. And you're playing from a floor monitor. You weren't on in-ears or anything like that. Wow, that's hard to get anything back from those that's like accurate or sounds good, right?
Yeah, it was tough. And it also led to other experiences, again, like learning how to get out of my own way and allow my body to do what it can do versus feeling like feel like I'm trying to force something to happen. That's still kind of a continual battle for a lot of bluegrassers is playing too hard.
Yeah.
But when it's right, again, it's a lot of like what athletes talk about being in the zone, where you're getting kind of this maximum effect based on a minimal perceived amount of kind of energy and input to the instrument. And all you can really do is learn how to set the stage for that. That's another way to sum up a lot of my journey with this is I can't expect that to happen, but I can learn more about me, my tension, my experience, my fears and anxieties as it plays into, choices on the instrument. But when I can get out of the way of a lot of that stuff and be healthy and settled and breathe, it does create the environment for more of that stuff to happen.
Has the technology change helped, like with in-ear? Do you use in-ears sometimes now?
With the Bela Fleck touring, certainly it's all in-ears.
Does that ease some of that issue of having to project so much?
Yeah. I still tend to play too hard on some of the real, rip-roaring kinds of things.
Yeah.
But
he mics individually, obviously, right? Like that's a big band out there. That's a lot of noise.
It does help as far as not digging in too much. I'm not fighting for it as much.
Yeah.
I'll tend to just fall into the trap of it because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to kind of like go hard sometimes, but
tell me a little bit about the Bluegrass Heart project. Like when he calls you and says, "Hey, I'm doing this thing." I don't know if it just came out of the blue or if you kind of knew it was coming. Is it the kind of thing where you like those are? I mean, I can't imagine how you work out your arrangement or what to do in those tunes. Like, how much work do you put in prior to the session for a thing like that, where it's complicated?
Well, guys like Bela, and when I've recorded with Thiele and people like this, there's versus like most of the Nashville sessions that I go in and have no clue. Here's a chart and let's go. Yeah. There will be some demos and maybe some rehearsals. With Bela, there's, definitely rehearsing before you show up for the session.
Yeah.
There's also, I've done a gig,
Thankfully.
at least one gig with him annually for 20 years now.
Okay.
And a lot of times he'll workshop some of his new materials. And a lot of the songs that at least that I played on this record were tunes that we played 4 or 5 years ago in Telluride.
Okay.
Or even back when I had
so he's been nursing this stuff for a while.
Yeah, he's always writing. And again, this is the first kind of collective body of kind of bluegrass-based music since 1999.
Right.
So...
Acoustic Planet.
Yeah.
Were you on that?
I wasn't on it, but I did the tour. That was the one where that was my first kind of entry into his world, specifically of where Tony Rice didn't do the tour, and so I did. But anyway, the point, so show up at his house for a few rehearsals and got familiar with what the parts are and what the intent for the tune. Sometimes there's some demos. But you go to the session basically prepared. And
what does that look like for you? Like, how much time do you need to spend on a set of Bela Fleck tunes?
It depends, I'm pretty good at within the session skill set for that kind of work with Bela, of like making a chart for me that's very readable and understandable, and it's a roadmap. I don't have to go in and like memorize all this stuff. I can use the chart as a way to.
But on stage, you're not reading.
No.
Okay.
No.
So at that point, you've memorized.
Yeah. For the session, I'm reading, and then we'll work to move to this performance state, which now that's for what we're doing out there, it's 2.5 hours of music that we started working on last year.
Hours.
Yeah. And the thing about the Bela Fleck level of stuff that I've recognized from day one, even studying his music from 25, 30 years ago, is it is complex. But one of the things, for me at least, that make this gig fun and playing this music what it is very musical at the end of the day.
Totally.
It is extremely complex because that's the way he thinks about things. But there's a melody there. There's usually some kind of, it's not just complexity for complexity's sake.
How much is a record like Drive like a blueprint for you, where Tony sort of laid out how to deal with Bela Fleck's music in that context? Like, I'm sure that was something.
Totally. Well, and Bela will be the first to say too, like the way Tony Rice's rhythm playing makes his pocket feel. And he will say too, like those records, Drive, Acoustic Planet stuff, he's writing with those guys in mind too. He can hear Sam Bush's mandolin chop and what it's supposed to do in this particular section, or what Tony might do, in an intro of some tune or another that's kind of spacey and weird, but also still very rooted and rhythmic at the same time.
Are there a few hallmarks of Tony's rhythm playing that have really stuck with you? Like, I'm assuming that he's a huge influence on you.
Yeah, one of the main things Tony would, where if in bluegrass, it's almost in tune. If most people in bluegrass are boom chucking like that, most people in bluegrass are just, boom chuck, bass note strum.
Yeah.
Tony's thing is and I'm not really doing it a lot of justice, but that instead of a boom chuck, it's boom chuck sweeping through.
Yeah.
And that in no way sounds like Tony Rice, but that's sort of the functional stuff that's going on. And again, a lot of that kind of anticipating like a new chord change.
A beat ahead.
Which is basically the school of Clarence White, too. If you go listen and study a lot of Clarence White rhythm playing, really syncopated like that.
Yeah.
And so Tony's sort of amalgamation of Clarence, Jimmy Martin, as far as just from an energy standpoint, and from all the days that he played with J.D. Crowe, to just have that kind of bluegrassy, fiery drive. You get this beautiful kind of blend and marriage of like this intricacy with that kind of bluegrass power too. Mm-hmm. Like a really serious, heavy chops drummer like, Steve Gadd or Dave Weckl or Benny Caluta or something like that. They can, really, subtle within the subdivisions, but all kind of aiming for this like serious, noticeable groove and pocket and energy.
So in his tunes, not Tony's, but in Bela's tunes, when the harmonic content starts getting more out there, is he like, are those chords and stuff notated in chart form, or is it all just kind of like you have to interpret it?
Yeah, there's a lot of interpreting.
Okay.
And there's also if there's patterns, like one of the beautiful things about this sort of standard bluegrass G, there's no thirds.
Yeah.
There's nothing to kind of get in the way if I'm playing it, or if I make it more of a ninth kind of a thing. That would be kind of directly related to where I hear a melody going. So there's, kind of like a jazz player, hopefully will listen to the top line, the melody line, and, this version of this chord kind of works. And Tony was real fond of like minor sevens.
Yeah.
Or like the 11. And ninths and things like that. So there's a bit of a kind of a vocabulary, a chordal vocabulary that informs a lot of that, the way that we still play a lot of that music. Again, like to your point, you can hear on drive. It doesn't get too kind of thick, like jazz.
Right.
That kind of stuff. There's usually not room for that kind of thing. And it's funny, like a lot of times the more complex that maybe his stuff will get, meaning Bela's rolls or something like that, it will oftentimes just mean
Require
I need to just play a power chord, and that actually supports it better than trying to say, oh, you've got this flat 13 and or this alternate whatever.
Yeah, because you don't need to be
playing
that note.
What he needs is a downbeat and a feel.
Yeah. Does he discuss your parts with you as the session's going down very much?
Yeah, generally. I mean, as a producer, he's also really good at kind of, communicating what he needs and finding that balance of like, okay, I've got a room full of people that know what to do on their instrument, but I also know what I need this song to be. So it's, he's well aware. We were talking about that just a couple of days ago, just like you can't tell somebody what to play too much. You try to guide and say, here's the vision for this, and I think this voicing will serve this, purpose better. But at the end of the day, there's the personality behind it and all that kind of stuff. I think he does a good job of allowing it to be what it needs to be.
Did you ever meet Doc Watson?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have some good hangs with that guy?
Yes. Yeah, I was fortunate to be around Doc.
So he lived in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Was he? I don't know if he was in Boone or something like that, or where did he live?
Boone, specifically Deep Gap, which is just outside Boone.
So how far is that from where you grew up? Was he a presence in Asheville?
Not Asheville so much. I mean, as the crow flies, Asheville to Boone is maybe an hour and 45 minutes, but it's a windy, way to get up there. So, I mean, geographically, as far as our home bases, we didn't really cross paths that much. And it was really only when I started being more out into the sort of professional realm that I really start getting to know him and hanging. As a kid, I would go see him. He would come to these little festivals throughout the state or little shows here and there.
Right. Yeah.
And so, and I had, every record. And he is sort of the primary kind of foundation of my playing as far as flat picking and, fiddle tune interpretation and that kind of thing. Once I was out with Ricky and then kind of stayed out there in the acoustic scene, was around him a lot more, either at Merle Fest or, just crossing paths on the road. He and I have a mutual friend over there in North Carolina that would put on a benefit show every year. This is kind of back 10 or 15 years ago. And I would see him there quite a bit. And then I got to record with him,
what was that?
I have a duet record called Not Too Far From the Tree.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's all these folks, heroes, Tony Rice, Jerry Douglas, Earl Scruggs is on it, my dad, David Greer. But, Doc is kind of like the kingpin of this. The only way we could work it out was I brought some mobile gear to Lyons, Colorado, or Longmont, actually. The festival's in Lyons, where our hotel was in Longmont, and we recorded a duet in a hotel room of Whiskey Before Breakfast, and we did a few other tunes as well. But that's the one that ended up on that record, just a rendering of a fiddle tune with Doc. And,
oh man, that must have been a rush, eh?
Yeah, it was great, and it won a Grammy. It won a country instrumental back when they had that category.
Yeah.
And I called him to talk about it. And he says, "We fooled him again."
Oh my God, that's so cool. Did you how did the arrangement come together for that? What was the process? Did you just show up and kind of trade the tune a bit? And
yeah, I mean, there's sort of a template, at least in the guitar duet world, where somebody will kick it, in this case, it's Doc Watson, so please, lead us off, sir. And you just trade it back and forth 3 or 4 times, and then maybe something happens. I think in this, I play a little bit of harmony stuff, harmony lines around one of the parts. Fiddle tunes are so squared, 2 A's, 2 B's, and
Right.
It's just a pass around, and maybe there's, like I say, some kind of slight arrangement idea if it's a record. A lot of times if we're doing something like this live, it might be a little trade thing or whatever, but you generally kind of feel like this arc happen and then you're done. Right. Kind of like a jazz head where everybody kind of takes their turn with it and then you move on. It's simplistic like that, yeah.
Yeah. Your solo playing is great, but there's not a lot of stuff out there that I'm aware of. But there's that, you do an Arkansas Traveler, speaking of fiddle tunes, on that record from 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, that was the More I Learn record.
More I Learn.
Yeah. That's actually the most recent.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
When you approach doing a solo fiddle tune like that, are you drawing from, all those experiences playing with Doc and hearing his records and how he approached playing solo fiddle tunes and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I also kind of branch out into other, especially for that specific tune. I mean,
that's a great arrangement.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Norman Blake was the first guy for that specific tune, kind of present a solo version. And it's always, kind of daunting for such an ensemble form of music, especially with the guitar being kind of, when the rhythm guitar goes away in a band, like there's this big hole left. So just to play solo flat picking is kind of a little bit of an art in and of itself of how you still kind of navigate through to help communicate chord changes and things like that, and not just be kind of like one finger on a piano, one note at a time kind of sound. So that was, a goal with that kind of stuff, is to kind of keep this, chordal stuff real full. And again, that's one of the things that Norman was always really good at.
Is there an example of that, like maybe in the context even of that
Well, like
tune,
the melody is... So that would turn into, when the chorus... again, involving chord tones, and again, I'm started improvising and investigate some other variations to just sort of keep the melody there, but not necessarily so
rigid.
Kind of rigid, yeah. So, and that was also another one of my favorite John Hartford statements is, he always encouraged people to play with the music. I really like that.
Yeah.
It's like, don't find yourself. You don't have to stay within these in the lane.
Right.
It can be real playful within that.
He was good at that. Did you get a chance to play with him?
A little bit, yeah.
You did?
He started getting sicker about the time I was coming up. I had a weird moment with him backstage at Merlefest one year. One of the first times I'd played there with Ricky. And again, that's a big festival for me because it's right sort of in North Carolina, and I grew up.
Play there every year?
Been there a lot.
Yeah.
And this was like early on in this experience. And here comes John Hartford passing me in the hallway backstage, and he says, "Hello, Bryan," in this Hartford voice. And it just freaked me out that he knew my name in the first place. And because I'm on the way out to the stage. Was he aware of you
through the Skaggs band? Okay.
I think so. And then he just said, "I like your guitar playing." And I was so flustered because in my brain I'm thinking, how can I, as I'm trying to go to the, they're introducing the band in a matter of seconds probably, how do I tell John Hartford, what he's meant to me in the world and, in this passing moment? And all that came out when he says, "I like your guitar playing," I looked at him, I said, "Me too." Kind of like, if your wife says, anything and you love you too or whatever, and it's not the right kind of answer. That's what came out, was this stupid slip.
God. You probably remembered it forever, and he's long forgotten that you said
I'll never
such a crazy thing.
But that's, again, like to the fiddle tune, my interpretation, I really do like the whole idea of, from the solo guitar point, how the thing can kind of ebb and flow based on other chordal stuff. Kind of, and again, sort of thinking like a jazz player. Chord melodies within the flow of fiddle tunes to keep it playful.
So that guitar is a triple O.
Yeah, this is a brand new instrument, actually. It looks 80 years old. It's made by the fine folks over in Hillsborough, North Carolina, at Pre-War Guitars.
Oh, this is a pre-war.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're on a podcast here, but this looks like a beaten up 40s Martin.
Yeah, and it's built on all those specs too, and it's really great. I haven't played it a ton.
How did they do such a good relicking job on it? That's crazy.
I don't know. I mean, and the reason I like it is not so much that it looks funky and old, but they've kind of cracked the code with a lot of just the vintage feel, the response, and the way this thing kind of, notes explode out of it, and the volume that it has. It's very
amazing
responsive
sounding.
and alive sounding.
Yeah. So they do like all the gamut of like dreadnoughts and triple O's and
they do like a round shoulder Gibson style and certainly a Martin D28 and these smaller bodies.
Is that where you're touring with?
No, this happened to be close to the door on the way out today, and again, I love playing it. I hadn't played it in a while, so I thought I'll take it here and see what happens.
So what do you tour with?
It's a 1936 D28.
You do take that out? Yeah. Does that make you nervous?
No,
Okay.
no. That's,
It's a workhorse.
Yeah, there's nothing that sounds like that guitar.
Yeah.
And it's not in mint condition either. I think, to be clear, if it were some kind of collector's piece, I probably wouldn't take it out. But it looks kind of like this one.
Yeah.
And I have a pickup in it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a lot of the vintage Martins?
I have the 36 D28. I have a 35 D18, another 1935 single 018.
How does the 28 and the 18 differ in your mind for
Well,
bluegrass?
in these particular instruments, the 18's got a little more of, to me, what good mahogany guitars have this kind of mid-rangey but very throaty kind of sound, like a real direct. A lot of people say it's bright, but I don't think it's brighter as much as it is like this, almost like brass, like a trumpet. Just it really can cut through a lot of things. It's a good lead guitar. Brazilian rosewood D28s, a lot of times their frequency range has a broader kind of span. You'll notice a little more low end. My particular 36, to me, is voiced a little more mid-rangey like a D18. I've always found myself intrigued by guitars that kind of do, if it's a mahogany guitar that has rosewood characteristics, or rosewood guitar that have some of that mahogany characteristics, because rosewood guitars can get kind of thick and thuddy sounding pretty quickly too.
Yeah.
And some mahogany guitars can get just kind of thin sounding.
Do you have a favorite?
For the bluegrass sound, meaning like
The 28.
Yeah, when you need to do that, like this, again, from the Rice influenced, sort of heavy, punchy rhythm, like there's nothing that sounds quite like a D28. A 30s D28 played that way is the thing.
Right. Does yours have a history that you're aware of?
I would love to know it. I mean, it's, again, totally beat up, and there's parts of the back of the neck that are literally worn in like divots, and they're not capo divots. It's somebody's hand that just played the thing forever. And the back of the wood is soft enough, and it's...
Where did you find it?
I was at Gruen's.
Okay.
I guess I'm going on about 6 years with this thing now. It had a new bridge plate and bridge, and it was, I could tell that the guitar had some kind of reopening up to do. It's a little closed sounding, even as good as it was, and it's improved since I've played it. I've been kind of committed to it.
So that's a recent guitar, though.
For me, I've tried to be as monogamous as I can with this one. I usually get one for about a couple years and I move on.
Oh, really? So that's been a pattern.
I'm way unfaithful.
Oh yeah. So you're going to stick with this one for a while.
It's garnered my my affection.
And you've got a pickup in that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, again,
so has pickup technology improved to the point where you're happy with the live sound you can get?
I'm happy with what's in there. Yeah, it's a Baggs Lyric and a Joe Mills mic. You familiar with those things?
No.
There was a guy here in Nashville named Joe Mills that found some old, I think a Japanese kind of like little lapel mic kind of parts, small kind of things. But for a lot of years, that's a lot of records that you hear like in the 70s and 80s where acoustic guitars were recorded with this little drop-in mic, Joe Mills mic. But
that's that. Okay,
Joe Glazer wired this thing in with the Baggs to create this kind of dual system.
So where does the mic sit?
The mic kind of, it clamps to this back brace and kind of sits just inside the hole.
Oh, so you can take it out.
Yeah,
it's
I can take the whole thing out.
Yeah.
But the point is that it's a really great mic, and the Baggs thing does what I need it to do. I mean, it still sounds like a pickup. And then that gets, that's one line that gets separated at a Grace Felix preamp on the floor, and then we're done.
Yeah.
It's the goal there, kind of like with recording gear.
You blend it yourself.
Yeah.
To your taste. You send the sound guy one signal.
Yeah.
That's a blend. Okay.
Yeah. It's the fact that the Grace stuff is just so high quality. It's just, Class A.
That stuff is crazy.
Punchy, clean, electronics. I think,
Does everyone in Bela's band have a Grace? They probably do, right?
We all do. I mean, this again, that Bela gig is totally acoustic. There's no pickups except for the bass.
Oh.
The bass has a direct line.
Okay.
And he's using a Felix.
So you don't plug in at all for that
No.
gig? Oh, wow, okay.
To clarify, actually, Bela does one song on this cello banjo that's with nylon strings and really quiet, and he runs it through his Felix.
Okay.
So there are two.
So you don't bring a thing at all.
No.
You're just playing straight into a mic.
Yeah.
Cool.
Again, with in-ears, you can get away with it. If we were
Yeah.
not on ears, we'd probably use pickups. So there are two Felixes on stage. Is that correct?
I think so.
Does that work?
So the Bela thing is a current tour, right? Like that's coming up?
We've been out. We did the first official run last fall.
Yeah.
And kind of gone in different pockets of, 2 to 3 week runs up to now. Right now, I'm kind of in the middle of a kind of a shortened run. We've got 4 more gigs in this little batch. And then I'm out for a little while. Then there's just some kind of weekend one-off kind of stuff happening.
Does somebody else fill if you can't do stuff? Do you?
Yeah,
is it
well,
like-
you should clarify, like this particular Bluegrass Heart project involves a lot of different people.
Right.
Like I'm one of 4
there's
guitar
Molly
players.
and
Yeah,
Billy Strings and
Cody Kilby.
Okay.
And Cody's done some of the gigs. There's a guitar player that's going out later in a few weeks from here in September will be Sean Richardson, who tours with Sierra Hull,
Oh, okay.
who's done some of the gigs too with Bela.
But when you go out on tour, there's not more than one guitar player, is there? Okay. Just those extravaganza shows like at the Ryman and stuff
Yeah,
where there's
yeah.
5 guitar players.
Special events, which kind of represent that record, which
Yeah.
is kind of the little taste of the current community. But yeah, the touring band is represented by one person each. And what's been cool about it, I mean, I've done all the tours except for that one little batch that Cody did, with different fiddlers and different mandolin players. And it's neat to see, different folks come in like Stuart Duncan or Michael Cleveland or Billy Contreras or Sierra playing mandolin, or now Jake Jolliffe is out there doing some stuff. And it kind of keeps the music, I don't want to say interesting, but just engaged and,
Yeah.
continually
Different
kind of-
feels and-
again, we can play with it in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a Bryan Sutton band?
There was, when I made that More I Learn record, that was part of my goal with that record, again, to write more, to sing more, to do more, what felt like kind of solo power stuff, not just
Yeah.
me by myself, but just me as an artist, and with the intent of having a band. And so the guys that are playing on the record are the folks that I took out on the road, Sam Grisman and Mike Barnett and Casey Campbell.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah, and we had a good time. And again, it was the exercise of being vulnerable and singing songs that
Yep.
I wrote in front of people that I'd
Yeah.
never really done much of that on any other record, at least, or any other time in my life, just always being sort of a backup guy, side
Yep.
person. So anyway, that was...
Is it something that you're drawn to do, or do you just kind of feel like, meh?
It's funny, because I keep trying to think, I should make another one and make another record or get back into that. Because I do so many other things, like what life feels like a lot of times is 3 full-time jobs for me between the sessions and the touring
Yep.
and this teaching thing that's kind of kicked in the last 10 years, which is, pretty close to like
Is that a True
real...
Fire thing that you're doing? Or?
I think, True Fire owns the company, but the site is called Artist Works.
Okay.
And
And that's pretty deep, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like a huge
there's a lot
well
going on.
of information in there.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
And it's a good experience for me, and I think people that
Are you
engage with that-
actively adding to it constantly, or?
Well, over the 10 years, the curriculum has morphed and changed and grown to what it is now. But they're literally every day there's new content that I put up that are all in this camp of what we call video exchanges, where the students that want to do it can send me a video of them working on something that's within the curriculum or whatever we've just talked about. We go in and out of that.
Every day?
Well, yeah, I'll usually go, like that's the work of it for me is to go and film and kind of bank videos, response videos.
Okay.
And so I generally every day will upload whatever is, I work a week out. Like if you send a video today, you'll get a response in a week. And so my job is within that week to stay ahead of it all enough. And again, that's another balancing act, another juggling.
Are you aware of how many people are taking the Bryan Sutton course at any given time? Like,
It's like a lot of subscription stuff where it goes up and down, but it's hovered a little over 2,000, I think.
holy crap.
Folks.
And that's all over the world, of course.
Yeah.
And amazing.
Yeah. It's a good thing. I enjoy doing it. But that also factors into your original question about like, what do I want to do with my time as an artist now that, I'm at this point and I have done it. I've gone out there with my own band. Do I want to keep doing it? That was part of the learning process with that was like, yeah, I can do it.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of things in life where it's one thing to get it going, it's another thing to keep it going, like any relationship, whatever. Like, what are we going to do to sustain this? And it's when I started thinking like that, it's like, I don't know that I have bandwidth for that, the maintenance of it, the fact that now I'm an artist and, need to do this many gigs a year or have this, I don't know. It felt like too much. It's sort of like the guy that, hot rods cars in the garage and then just sells them. Just so you can go get another hunk of something and build it. You know what I mean? That's sort of what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, especially when you've got a good career in the studio and you're playing with Bela Fleck, it's like, yeah, I can understand why that would take a back seat.
Yeah, I am fortunate to not feel like I have to rely on touring or being out in front of people to make a living happen.
Right.
That's
touring as somebody's guitar player is definitely like a lot more low maintenance bandwidth wise in your brain than it is bringing out your own band where you've got to like deal with all the crap that you got to deal with.
Book the hotels and you're the one that's everything's in your name. And so, there's I don't want to say it's easier because again, I'm fortunate within even the stuff I do. It's not so much just like, here's a guy on the guitar. It's like in the Hot Rise band, I was a member of the band. In the Bela Fleck band, it's his gig, but it's, my name is featured on a lot of the, the festival bookings or whatever. It's just, I've been fortunate to have some career equity to cash in on and people to use over the years. And kind of like in jazz, where you have a certain sort of crew of people that, it's cool that this person is playing with these other people. And it's, it's kind of a thing that happens. And so, I'm aware that is something that I can take advantage of and have earned over the years. And it's worth keeping, so.
Yeah, totally.
Whether it's my own thing or, that there are other versions of thoughts of like, maybe it's just, put something new together. It's not so much about me, but maybe a band or like a little trio or something or just different projects like that. Those are fun to think about.
Get the telly out, man.
Yeah. Well, that's a version of it is, you mentioned playing a national. I love playing resonator guitars.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the thought of, I have this sort of vision of like a real Jerry Reed inspired, sort of take on fiddle tunes or bluegrass tunes and kind of funky, kind of raw, see where that goes. I'm a big fan of that kind of sound.
Well, thanks for hanging out. And
it's good to see you.
Talking about all this stuff, man. That's great. Do you feel like playing a tune?
My hands are a little quiet today. Almost in tune.
I still can't believe that guitar is new.
Yeah, you should play it. I mean, it doesn't sound new either. It's always the hardest to try to pick a tune to play. Here's an old classic. This will be the Salt Creek old fiddle tune. finally.
Yeah. Salt Creek.
Yeah.
Wicked, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. That was my conversation with Bryan Sutton. Hope you enjoyed it. I had a blast speaking with him. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for another chilling episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. See you then. Music Makers and Soul Shakers is produced at the Hen House Studio in Nashville, Tennessee by Steve Dawson. Please remember to subscribe to the show and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors this season, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.